I am Brad Keelor. He is Derrick Dasenbrock. Coming up next on our very special St. Patrick's Day episode of Director's Cut, gonna find out the most fun you can have in the DC Baltimore area. You might want to run over after you're done. Top of the morning, everybody, in my worst Irish accent, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor, the wee little director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, until I get fired, I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell. Some are personal, some are professional, all are fun. That's just the way we do it at Director's Cut. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, after you watch this amazing interview today, head over to geoinstitute.org, and there you will find out so many things about us, including that we're a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And if you like what you see today, and there's a lot of green on your screen right now, I feel like you will, you should click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. With all of that out of the way, I'm going to remove my sunglasses dramatically here so that I can actually see the proceedings here and that you can see me. All the way from Minnesota, where he is the Geotechnical Engineering Section Manager at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. It is Derrick Dasenbrock. Derrick, welcome and thank you for doing this.
Well, cool. Great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
We have 10 questions, and I know there's going to be some follow-ups, but the 10 base questions, same as we do every week. 2 of them are the same that we ask everybody. We start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Okay, well, I've recently returned to the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I'd been here for nearly 25 years, spent about 5 years with Federal Highways, and now I'm back in a new position as the section manager. So in that role, I think it's probably just making things work. So Minnesota DOT is great because we get to do site investigations and self-perform. We've got field crews that do borings and standard penetration testing, cone penetration testing, and we can also do geophysics. So some exciting ways to explore transportation foundations. I really enjoy also the opportunity to work in our lab and do the testing for consolidation or shear strength, so we can help provide recommendations for the structures that we build here in the state of Minnesota. Those could be bridges, could be retaining walls, culverts, slopes for embankment stability. And so we provide all those recommendations either to our districts or the bridge office and make sure that things stay where they're supposed to stay.
That is fantastic. And we are going to talk more at length about your career in public service as we get further through the interview. The meat and potatoes, as I say, of Director's Cut are the fun questions. And again, all of them are fun. It's just that some are more fun than others. Derrick, I want you to think hard on this one.
Okay.
Give us
I'm
5
ready.
features of your ideal vehicle.
Okay. So is reliability a feature, or does that have to be like a feature like electric windows?
Consumer Reports says it is, so
Okay.
I feel like it is.
All right. Well, I had some battery problems this past winter when it was 19 below zero and the car failed to start, and I was like, I'd like something to start. So I'd probably put that right up there as the number one thing. I think easy maintenance. I've never had a car that had really difficult maintenance, but you hear horror stories like the headlight needs to be replaced. Step 1, remove bumper, drop radiator grill, take out CSV bearing, and then replace the headlight. So
welcome to 2025.
Yes, it would be like, okay, so reliability, maintenance. And then probably, I don't know, fuel efficiency, gas mileage. I don't like filling up. So it could be electric, could be gas, as long as it gets me where I'm going without constantly needing to fill it up. So I think we're at 3 there. Storage. I've driven a pickup truck for 20 some odd years, and I probably could do an SUV, but I throw the bikes in the back or the kayaks on top, and so it needs to be something that'll easily, tote the toys around. Plus, everybody calls if they've got shelves or a snowblower that needs to be moved, so it's a good excuse for like beer and free pizza, which I usually get offered after I haul somebody else's stuff somewhere. And then, should have a creature comfort for the last one, so I'm going to say satellite radio. We'll go with that.
But still, I like that you stuck with a level, we'll call it a level of excitement all the way through. Because if you had picked those first 4 and then went with like racing tires for the 5th or something like that, I feel like it just wouldn't have worked. Like you were solid all the way through with those, I feel like. So if anybody out there in viewer land has a vehicle that'll start in 20 below that has all these features that Derrick's looking for, you can reach him through us, or he's pretty easy to find on the MnDOT website, I think.
I just, as you were mentioning that, though, I think 4-wheel drive may bump satellite radio, because definitely around here, if I have a pickup truck, right, it's not just rear-wheel drive, or I'm not getting anywhere without like 500 pounds of sand in the back. So I'll revise my 5 ever so slightly.
You can have 5A and 5B. That's okay.
All right.
So the third question is always the research or practice question. This week is no different. We cannot break away from tradition on Director's Cut. That would be verboten. Back at MnDOT, we're going to talk a little bit more about your work there now, and we're going to go into foundation testing. When I think of you, Derrick, I do think first and foremost foundation guy, and I do think testing. So it's perfect that you cover both of these things as you walk us through what you've been working on lately in this area.
Okay. Well, I think even way back when I started at MnDOT in 95, one of the first things that we were doing back then, because there was the spooky terror of Y2K on the forefront, and is anything going to work in 5 years? We were replacing a lot of our laboratory equipment, and so it was exciting to look at some of the new things on the market. And we were moving from DOS-based systems to Windows, a really exciting time, and changing out a lot of the equipment. But that's where I first got into doing a lot of our lab testing. We replaced our consolidometers and direct shear, and so I'd say I started out with some of my work just like, as a lab rat, and getting better information there. And actually not too far after that is when we first here at MnDOT got our cone penetrometer, and that was like circa 2000 or so. So then we had field testing, and then sort of building on that, once we had the ability to do better design with some of the better information, we started getting into field testing. So that's when we got to start looking at foundation performance, and we had some big bridges, so we did O-cell tests on some large drilled shafts, and did statnamic tests, did, I'll say, high strain dynamic monitoring on some big piles, and even monitored spread footings. So there were occasions where we'd be able to put monitoring points and then measure settlement, first with rod and level, and then later with some fancier equipment, GPS systems and automated total stations and shape accelerators and all sorts of stuff to figure out performance in the field of the foundations. So it was nice to be involved with sort of both sides of that, from the design, being able to make better predictions with better data, and then field monitoring so we could see how well our predictions turned out. And usually we got it pretty close. So, yeah.
So if you had to pick one thing that you're doing now, and I guess we can go to testing, but it could really be anything, that would have shocked 1995 you when you joined MnDOT, what would it be? And this can either be something that you personally just didn't think you would ever be doing as part of your job, or equipment that you just was so far in the future that you didn't think would exist, or testing procedures or whatever.
It probably would be some of the real-time monitoring that we were able to do. So when we started using in-place inclinometers and shape accelerators, we had some landslide projects. And it would be that with traditional inclinometers, we might send a crew out frequently at first, but then it would be like, kind of out of sight, out of mind. So we might read it like monthly, and then it might be 4 months apart, and then a year apart. And then something happens and folks are like, well, what's it doing? I'm like, well, we haven't read it in 9 months. And so you quickly go out and read it again. And then there's one point here and another point up there. And you really had no idea what happened in between. But I actually went to a Transportation Research Board, a TRB meeting in DC, and they had a speaker. So it was the proprietor of the company that made the inclinometers, and they were just like instrumented garden hoses. They had a segment every foot with a little accelerometer in them, and you hooked it up to a cell modem, and you could put them in the ground and have it hooked up to the data logger and have it call and phone home, and you'd get the data without having to go to the site. And we had some sites that went underwater that we were still able to read what was going on, and that was fascinating because it turned out that the water pressure on the side of the slope actually stabilized the landslide for a while. And then when it retreated, it started moving again, and that was something that we had imagined like could occur, but now we had data that supported it. And we'd be able to see if there were rain events out in the field and be like, oh yeah, it rained really hard and a lot yesterday, and it turns out now the slope moved right then. So I think that is something I hadn't thought that you'd be able to do, get that level of quality data. And that helped us on so many projects because we were able to talk with our district engineers and construction people and say, yes, this is a problem. It's moving at this rate, or it's moving in response to these different types of triggering events. And we'd be able to say it either creeps or it moves episodically, and just the quality helped so much in us both determining what sort of fix was needed because we knew where it was slipping, we knew when, and that was kind of a game changer for, let's just say, for confidence, because sometimes we could ask a question, do we really need to spend $500,000 on sheeting? And it'd be like, yeah, we do. Or so. There you go.
And that is the magic of Director's Cut. Just put it out there and let the stories happen. Those are fantastic examples. I really like that a lot. We're going to double down on nostalgia now after we just asked you that one to think back. We're going to have you think even farther back. And all of us, it's March. This is the beginning of project season, I feel like, for millions of K-12 students across America and the world, where you're starting to get your big projects started for the end of the year. Well, hopefully. Many students will procrastinate until the night before they're due. But if you didn't do that, we're going to have you think back, Derrick. What is your most memorable project from your K-12 career?
Okay, so one stands out, and it was for 9th grade civics class. A couple of my friends and I, Tom, Pam, and John, for whatever reason, we're trying to get out of doing whatever the standard project was. I think we needed to go interview some important person, and we were all introverts. It's like, I do not want to have to talk with a mayor or a police chief. We were like anything to not interview somebody for 3 hours or whatever it was that we were supposed to do. But we had an option because it was sort of like, well, you can do this or you can do something else. And so we said, we would like to put together a mock trial. And we started doing this, and it took so much time and effort. When we got done with it, we were sort of like, we could have interviewed somebody for 3 hours, and instead we spent easily a few hundred working on this. But it was fun. I mean, we had a great time. We invented the characters, we invented the scenario. We met in Tom's basement regularly to talk about how we were doing it, to create the nature of the trial, and made up character names. And it was just a fun time. And we all sort of remember the experience kind of fondly.
But don't you wonder, if that's part of the teacher's goal, right? Because I feel like we had situations where we did the same thing, and it would have been much easier to just go with whatever the garden variety thing was. But we had to write these poetry responses in 11th grade. This is what I remember. And I asked if, instead of writing them down, I could essentially make a soundtrack, like pick a song for each poem. Teacher was cool with it. We got to play it in class. They loved it. I mean, what was the reception for your mock trial?
Everybody had a good time. We probably had, I'll say, maybe a third of the class involved as either witnesses, or my friend Mark was the judge. We just had so much fun making up the names, right? So Moose Strongarm was the name of our bailiff, and then John played him, and another guy was the defendant, and so we had about a third of the class doing something, and the rest were jurors, I think it had to be like at least 2 days of class time for the actual trial. I think it was just like a robbery or something. We made it needlessly complicated. They ended up acquitting the defendant, but it was because we had decided that we were the curveball, and it's the perfect time of year for it, is that the video recording that we made of the guy like going through the bushes on the security camera was off by an hour, but this was on account of daylight savings time change. Wow. And so everybody's like, oh, it couldn't have been him because it shows, and he had an alibi for the other amount of time. But the time switch was there, and but anyway, so our defendant actually was guilty, but the jury acquitted him.
There was even video evidence. This is amazing. I think the other thing you pointed out is that it took 2 days worth of class sessions. That was the other beauty of these projects, is that when people did the presentations, you knew you weren't going to have to do anything else for like the whole week, because people were presenting and it was entertaining.
I think people thanked us for it too, because it was different than with our teacher at the time had a very kind of rote way of teaching things. He would do everything in exact outline form. So it was like Roman numeral 1, the judiciary, the Supreme Court, letter A, and then indent number 1A. I mean, it was all just this like pure outline. And then eventually, Roman numeral 2, the legislative branch, or so forth.
That is fantastic. And we're going to talk a little bit more about your acting ability a little bit later on in the interview, and people are going to want to stick around for this. First, though, you're a Marylander.
I am. Go Terps.
You are a native. You're from the suburbs. The palatial Keelor estate is in the suburbs of Virginia. They're not that different than the Maryland suburbs. Maybe they're a little newer. That's really about the only difference, is that Maryland was developed first before Virginia. Derrick, what is the absolute most fun someone can have in the Maryland suburbs of D.C.? And you're going to get controversial here for a couple reasons, but I like that.
I am going to get controversial because I'm going to say, living in the Maryland suburbs, we are equally as close to Annapolis, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. So it all depends on what you want, whether or not you're a state capital person or a largest principal city person or a nation's capital person or whatever. But I'm going to say the most fun thing to do living in the Maryland suburbs is heading up and taking a look at what Baltimore has to offer. And coming up on the first weekend in May, this year, May 3rd, it's going to be the kinetic sculpture race that the American Visionary Art Museum puts together. So I'm on the photography team. There are a number of people that go around and take pictures of the event, but it is a blast. So it's in their 25th year now, and human-powered all-terrain sculpture. So imagine that you and your friends get together and be like, I want to either pedal, push, or move a sculpture around the greater Inner Harbor from Federal Hill, around to Patterson Park, and maybe take a light dip in the Inner Harbor for a little bit in Camden. It's a blast. So Saturday morning kicks off early and lasts till a little after noon. There are generally at least like 25 entries of all different shape and form. Kineticbaltimore.com is the website, and you can see the historic photos from years past of many a sculpture that people have entered into the event. And it's fun for me to be part of the photo crew, because our team is one member's out on a kayak. We've got folks on scooters and bicycles, and try and capture the race for posterity. But it's a great time. So.
We will put the link down in the show notes for everybody to check out. You can see the kinetic sculpture race. And while you're there, I mean, think about some of the other cool stuff you can do in Baltimore. I have no idea whether people outside this area travel to Baltimore to do stuff, but I would recommend that you do so. Of course, you can. Everybody likes going to the Orioles games. That's kind of an easy one. But the art museums in Baltimore, as you mentioned, the Visionary Art Museum there, Derrick. The museum out on the Hopkins campus. There's another one in Mount Vernon, right near the Engineers Club, actually, that you could go check out. Fantastic art in Baltimore. The Edgar Allan Poe House. So many things you could do there. Do you have any other favorites you want to recommend?
I really like the Inner Harbor, going and looking at the submarine and hanging out and getting my Maryland clam chowder.
Fantastic recommendations. We are going to talk a little bit more about the state of Maryland here in a minute, because it's the other question that we ask everybody when they come on the show. How did you first get involved with ASCE and GI?
Okay, first involvement with ASCE was definitely, as many people of a certain age do, and that's with the concrete canoe competition. I rummaged through the files of actual photographs and see whether or not I can present this one in some way, shape, or form. That's our crew, circa 1992. I think we were at the Nationals. I don't remember where they are. I think Florida.
Well, someplace with palm trees. There are no palm trees in College Park. I can confirm that.
Very true. But that's how I got involved. So student chapter of ASCE and concrete canoe. And so that was my first, work, I think, with the professional society as a student member. And so that predated the Geo-Institute. The first actual GI event, I don't really remember. So I recall Geo Logan being a thing, and Geo-Institute conferences thereafter. But yeah, I it's been lost to the misty dusts of time. If there was a first thing where I saw the logo and be like, oh, hey, that's when I did that. I do remember the first things I started to get involved in. I think maybe as many people do, there's an evolution that you go through as you attend conferences. You first go and maybe it's to see technical sessions or visit with vendors at the trade show. And then maybe you start to get involved and do other things and as a presenter. So now you're, doing some work and submitting a paper and then presenting in a technical session or becoming part of a committee, or getting involved in some other way. I've been involved in what would eventually become our local GI chapter at the Minnesota Geotechnical Society since I moved up here to Minnesota for graduate school after attending Maryland. And so I've been involved, locally with them back since '95. But started to get involved with national GI. Probably whenever our conference was, I want to say Phoenix or San Antonio or somewhere. So
2015,
years
2016,
back, somewhere in there. It was, got involved with the Shallow Foundations Committee. And then after that, with the Technical Coordination Council and the Innovation Committee. And then was the chair of the Geo-Congress when it was here in Minneapolis in 2020, right before everything closed for COVID. And then have been trying to keep up my involvement both on a regional and national level over all the years. It's been good. It's a great community.
Fantastic sales pitch all over for ASCE. Again, you started out with the student activities, which is how many people get involved. And that's where we're going to link this today. I'm going to do the dramatic beard flip at this point. And I am wearing the 2025 Geo shirt competition winning design today because it was green. I figured why not? You can pick those up for $30 on our donation website if you just go to geoinstitute.org, click Student Participation Fund. go through the prompts, and this t-shirt could be yours in your home today. 100% goes to student programs. And then, Derrick mentioned the Technical Coordination Council, too. If you want to get involved with the GI Technical Committee, and you do, you should go to the website, go to the committees page, which is under community and the tabs at the top. You can apply to be on a technical committee. We have all different topics to suit you. And that's another great way to get involved. And someday you could be Derrick Dasenbrock. I think that's where that was ultimately going. So sometimes I word these questions exactly the way I thought they were going to, but I get a helping hand from the interviewee. And I got a little helping hand from you on this one, Derrick, and I really appreciate that. So this is one that I haven't asked anybody yet, and it made it in here. Derrick, what word to describe someone sounds, and I put that in italics, sounds like a compliment, but actually isn't?
Oh, yeah. So I've heard them either called backhanded compliments or left-handed compliments. I mean, so it's not like outright sarcasm, like, this is the best podcast ever, or it's like, but it usually will have like some sort of qualifier on it, like, oh, you're an excellent technical writer for an engineer, or something along those lines. It's kind of like, okay, so how many engineers are you familiar with, and are none of them good technical writers? Or, but there's often like some sort of apparent qualifier or something else, or like, Derrick, you do really well at taking photos at the AVAM, kinetic sculpture race. You must have a really good camera. And it's kind of like, that was going well until you sort of said that it was the camera that was good, as opposed to, my talent is the photographer. So I think that's what I thought of when you were saying it sounds like a compliment, but maybe not, or it just has sort of some sort of added thing that maybe wasn't needed.
I like that a lot. Do you ever respond to anything like that? Because everybody's different, right? I'm the type of person who would not say anything, but like keep it in my brain and in my heart for decades until you finally get that comeuppance later on and you feel justified for being upset. How do you react to stuff like that?
I will say that, to be honest, sometimes I'm not that quick, and it will pass me by, and then later on it'll be like, oh, was that sort of like a hidden dig or something like that, and they may just have, not even thought about it. But in the moment, if I kind of recognize it, it might be like, oh, you'd be surprised about how many engineers actually are quite good technical writers, or something like, well, I do have a really good camera, but I also like to think there's some talent involved in framing the shot and doing maybe, something with the focus or the blur or what have you. I found that a lot of times photos is just being in the right place at the right time, and hopefully having a lens that's appropriate.
I like that a lot. And standing up for the entire engineering field there, that's very noble of you as well, sir. I enjoy that too. We said that we were going to get back to your career in public agencies and public service, and this is the point where we're going to do that. I think for a lot of people, I mean, for me, it was one job, right? Like I've worked in the nonprofit world too, and it's kind of the same thing, but government service is a totally different deal. Other people, they know that's what they want to do, and they build their career doing that, whether it's a local, state, federal level, whatever. How did you make the decision to spend your career in public agencies?
That is a good question. I mean, so I think, my first foray into the work world was doing odd jobs for my mom, actually. She had a home-based business for a while. So some of it was photocopying. We had a big photostat film camera that you would use back in the day for enlarging and reducing black and white photographs, and a whole bunch of other equipment for, I guess, what you now do with desktop publishing, much, much easier, because everything was all film those days. But So that was probably the first thing I did. I had a summer job for Wild World, which I think is now like Six Flags America or something. And
but nothing can capture the glory of the original Wild World for those from the DC area.
That's true. And I think it was like Wild Kingdom or something, or there was some adventure park where you toured around and you had animals. Wild World was when they started putting rides and other things in, and built the wave park and the roller coaster. I was the projectionist at the 180 panoramic theater, which was weirdly part of the rides department as opposed to the entertainment department because it wasn't live entertainment. And quick aside here. It turned out that their indoctrination, you got to ride the Wild Thing, which was the roller coaster, when you were, when they were doing the training or whatever. And I had a fear of roller coasters at the time. And so my friend Brian, who was also like helping me run the theater, he really wanted to do it. And I was like, I am scared stiff of what we are about to do. But we went on the ride with the rest of the operations people that were onboarding that day. And all I remember is that as we came into the station, like Charlie, our manager, just sort of gave us this wave as it went through without stopping, and then proceeded to go through an additional 5 times nonstop. That actually, I think, cured me of my fear of roller coasters at the time. I was much better like on sequential, runs 2, 3, 4, and 5. Although I think I did like manage to turn my hands black and blue from like clutching the bar or something as tightly as I did. Anyway, so those were before government service. It's a long answer to this question. It just happened. We had the opportunity to be on something that was called the Summer Science and Engineering Apprenticeship Program, and that was administered by, I think, George Mason University and later University of District of Columbia. But you got a stipend to work with one of the many federal agencies. There was like a whole list. You could get a job at Fort Belvoir. You could get a job at Naval Service Warfare Center. You could get they were all government things in like the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines somewhere. So I ended up getting a summer job at the Harry Diamond Laboratories in Adelphi, Maryland, and that was sort of my first government job, working as a civilian for the Department of the Army as a student, because they invited me back to be an actual government employee after I'd been on this apprenticeship program for 2 years. So I started as a GS1 Step 1, and some of my colleagues were like, I didn't even know they went that low. But I was inexpensive labor, and it was great. Met a number of like physicists, engineers, mathematicians. I felt I contributed and enjoyed the work. Later, I ended up working for the University of Maryland in their instructional television system while I was going to school there. After that, had 2 summers at the Maryland State Highway Administration, moved to Minnesota for grad school. I was a TA and an RA there, and then went to work for MnDOT. So it just so happened that like ever since the summer engineering program, I was always working for a government agency, and really enjoyed it. I like working for the public. I think I like to think my talents provide good taxpayer value, and I think there have been a lot of projects where I and my colleagues are sort of like, we need to do this better or fix it right or do something. And working for the owner, it was always nice to be able to say, yeah, we need to spend our money responsibly. So kind of felt it was always like, it's like, I pay my taxes. We should build this correctly.
Yeah. So there are so many different directions we could go here. The first one is that in its later years, Cal Ripken was the spokesperson for Wild World, and I believe there was a TV ad where he is shown riding the Wild Thing. And I'm going to have to find this on YouTube for everybody so that they can enjoy it, and you can see what Derrick experienced. Now, the one I want to go back to here is the University of Maryland instructional TV, because for people watching this who are under about 35, this is probably not something they ever experienced. I had a class actually in grad school where we could download the video of it. Some of the sessions were remote, but it took forever and it was a pain. the professor would give us the schedule of when it was going to be on George Mason TV, and you could flip to the channel and watch it at like 5:30 on Tuesday. What was your job like at instructional TV? And can you describe just the service for people who have never heard of this?
Okay, well, it was in the era before the internet, and so it was basically live directed cable TV. You would have classrooms that had a tech booth, in the back of the room with the glass panels, and you'd be in the back. There would be cameras, usually 2 or 3, that I, as the tech guy, would operate, and so I would be in charge of doing the audio and the video for I'll say a standard college course. They were typically electrical engineering or mechanical engineering courses that then, students who were doing predominantly continuing education at often like government agencies would pay the system in order to have these classes. So imagine like electrical engineering 3301, where you're learning about, I don't know, something related to electrical engineering.
Circuits. Let's just say circuits.
Circuits. I like that. And so there would be a camera that could show kind of what the class was doing, one that you could focus on the instructor, and overhead one to look at whatever they might be writing on a flat surface on a countertop, and then one that you could track along with a series of whiteboards. And it was always a challenge because sometimes the professor would be standing like immediately in front of the whiteboard they were writing on, and so it was difficult sometimes to be able to show everything. And you had to track. So panning and zooming you had to pay attention. It wasn't something where, you could be doing your homework at the time, because you'd often have to scroll with whatever the formulas they were writing, because it was similar to a standard classroom. And so they might be using like 30 feet of whiteboard to, write some equations. And so you'd have to keep up with what they were doing and make sure the volume was good. And but yeah, it was essentially a TV production class, which I had luckily had a course in high school, so I was at least loosely familiar with all of the fading and audio and everything. But it was fun. There were a few times, though, where I had no idea how the students could keep a straight face. There was one engineering or electrical one where everything rhymed for a bit, and I couldn't. It was like, okay, in this formula we're raising pi to the 2 mu nu times e to the mu nu 2. And there were just a whole lot of 2's, mu's, and nu's, and I found it tremendously funny.
This is great. You really brought me back. The class that I took this way at George Mason was shot in a studio. And so it wasn't actually in a classroom, and it looked so much like the Bob Ross Joy of Painting show, because there would be the board behind him, and that was it. And it was just the professor and this board behind him, and maybe a lectern or something that he would have notes on, and that was really about it. And this kind of dark, like carpeted look background. This is the early 2000s, and it looked like it was about 1978. And I mean, no wonder we don't do this anymore, I think, is the moral of that story. We have much better delivery methods. But that is great, Derrick. Thank you for sharing that story, especially with the youth viewers. They're going to enjoy that a lot. It's 2025, not breaking any news to anybody there. Your TV, streaming, whatever services are probably full of reboots. So we had to ask somebody this. Derrick, I knew you'd have an opinion, so you're the lucky recipient of this question. What TV show most needs a rebooted version?
Oh, I was thinking about this, and there were I'll say, it had to be like my high school era where I was like watching the most TV, or like middle school to high school. So it's like whatever was going on in that time. So, like late 80s, I guess, because I was thinking, it's like, oh, would I want a reboot of Knight Rider or The Love Boat? Because early, I just remember with my parents, right, like getting home from grade school or whatever, and Saturday was always The Muppet Show and The Love Boat. Oh, yeah. And that's, I think, how I like knew anybody who was like a star in other shows. I imagine, like, for adults, they would see characters in other shows, and then they would appear on the Love Boat and be like, oh, well, that's Mary Tyler Moore or Dick Van Dyke or somebody here on the Love Boat. With me, it was the other way around. It was like I would see them on the Love Boat and then, like, watch the other shows and be like, oh, apparently they were famous, and that's why they were on this other show. Yeah, I don't know. I've watched a lot of, like, sitcoms too. So I mean, like, a reboot of anything like Get Smart or Hogan's Heroes or Gilligan's Island or all those shows would be fun. I am really glad that they did reboot of Doctor Who. I am a science fiction geek, and so it's great that Star Trek lives on and Doctor Who lives on. I tell everybody, though, that I think part of the reason that I enjoy geotechnical engineering is because a lot of times it's solving mysteries about and trying to figure out the way things work. And I think that probably comes from watching a lot of Scooby-Doo in my youth. So I am pleased that there have been, I don't know how many reboots of Scooby-Doo, and I hope more come along, because I think that solving the mysteries with the gang and heading off to the malt shop afterwards is a life I could get behind. So
we would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for that meddling engineer.
Yep.
I like that. It is, as we record this, St. Patrick's Day, and it is, as people watch this, just a few days past St. Patrick's Day. I've got the green shirt, the green beard. You've got your green Minnesota Wild
my
jersey.
green GI, Geo-Congress toque.
Beautiful. I'm impressed that people still have those. I love it. My family does virtually nothing on St. Patrick's Day other than I wear this ridiculous getup and record an episode of Director's Cut. I believe my daughter wore green earrings to school today. That's about the extent of our celebration. Derrick, have you ever done anything to celebrate St. Patrick's Day?
I have. I've got friends that are Irish and some that live in Boston on the North End and have a right good time going to Irish pubs and doing things. I probably myself, I'll be Irish for the day and just like having a green shamrock shake or breaking out the box of the green Thin Mint cookies because it's Girl Scout cookie season. But you can decide whether or not it's heresy or not. But for many years, what I would do with some of my friends is we would swap holidays and we would celebrate St. Patrick's Day at a Mexican restaurant. And then on Cinco de Mayo, we would go to an Irish pub because they were far less crowded in those scenarios. And so it just started to be a thing that we did. So we would simply go to an exactly like the opposite type of outing.
I feel like people have to respect that. Now, we do have to go back to something very important that you kind of glossed over there earlier. Shamrock shakes. Many people have never in their lives had a shamrock shake. I don't understand how this is possible, but it remains an unsavory truth of our times. Derrick, for someone who's never had a shamrock shake, give them the sales pitch.
I'm qualified.
I mean, do you do it because of your love of the Shamrock Shake or because it's available and it's March and you can't get it 11 months out of the year?
It's probably mostly that. But, I enjoy minty things in general. So if you hand me a peppermint milkshake any time of the year, I will devour it thusly.
And now it's not for those watching, I'm full disclosure, it is not the Chick-fil-A candy cane one that you get at Christmas there. That is a different, and I'm not going to say it's better or worse. It is a different product, but you should try a Shamrock Shake, people. You must get out there and do it. And with that, Derrick, you made it through all 10 questions. You made it through the bonus questions. You did so with flying colors, of course. For our viewers, if you liked what you saw, and I always say you're here at the end, so you probably did, you want to click like, subscribe, get notifications, and we'll let you know. Of course, we'll let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Derrick, thank you again for doing this, for sharing all the stories and making me remember the wild thing and getting to tell everybody there are no palm trees in College Park. There was so much good stuff today. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, happy to do it. I appreciate the invitation. And I watched a few episodes in the past and a few more just sort of getting ready. It's like, oh, okay, I could probably do that. But thanks so much for, I guess, just interviewing everybody. It's you bring a level of fun to the GI that I think really helps the community. It's good to get to know people, and so
was
appreciate
there one there?
Your role.
Am I the best interviewer for a GI director?
That would be something that sounds like a compliment that isn't. So
I love that.
Yes.
So for all of our viewers, thanks again for watching, and we will see you next week with another brand new episode of Director's Cut.